The birthday cake humiliation. The beginning. The smell of vanilla frosting and freshly brewed coffee filled the living room as I stepped through the front door. The house was louder than usual, filled with laughter, clinking plates, and the cheerful chatter of family members who hadn't seen each other in months. It was my 65th birthday. At least, that's what everyone kept reminding me. "Mom, you finally made it!" My son Marcus called from the kitchen, his voice overly cheerful as he wiped his hands on a dish towel. I forced a smile. Marcus had always been good at pretending everything was normal. The living room was decorated with bright balloons and gold streamers that read "Happy 65th Birthday." A large cake sat on the dining table, covered in smooth white frosting with pink roses piped around the edges. For a moment, my heart softened. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. I had spent nearly an hour getting ready that morning. My gray hair was neatly styled, and I wore the navy blue dress I had bought last week, a dress that cost far more than I should have spent. But I wanted to look nice. I wanted my family to look at me and feel proud. Instead, the first voice I heard belonged to my daughter-in-law. "Well, look who decided to show up." Tanisha Hayes Dupree leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, her lips curled into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Hello, Tanisha," I said politely. She looked me up and down, examining my dress as if it were something unpleasant she had stepped on. She muttered. "Interesting choice." Before I could respond, a pair of small arms wrapped around my waist. "Grandma!" Skylar, my 8-year-old granddaughter. Her dark curls bounced as she looked up at me with wide eyes. For a moment, I felt genuine warmth. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said sweetly. I smiled and gently touched her cheek. "Thank you, sweetheart." Children, after all, were innocent. Or at least, they were supposed to be. Marcus walked over and gave me a quick hug. "Glad you're here, Mom," he said. But even as he hugged me, his eyes drifted toward Tanisha, almost as if he were waiting for her approval. I noticed it. I always noticed it. But I had learned long ago not to say anything. "Come sit down," Marcus said, gesturing toward the living room. Family members filled the couches and chairs. My sister Gloria waved from the corner, while two cousins I barely recognized chatted near the window. But something immediately felt strange. There were plenty of empty seats, yet the only chair left for me was a small folding chair placed near the wall, far from everyone else, almost like an afterthought. I hesitated. Tanisha noticed. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a laugh. "That chair is perfect for you." A few people chuckled awkwardly. I slowly sat down. The metal legs creaked under my weight. I told myself not to overthink it. This was my birthday. Surely no one would try to humiliate me today, right? "All right, everyone," Tanisha clapped her hands. "Let's bring out the cake." Skylar jumped up excitedly. "I'll help." The little girl ran into the kitchen and returned carrying a tray of juice glasses. Purple grape juice sloshed near the edges as she carefully balanced the tray. "Careful," someone said. Skylar giggled. She walked around the room handing glasses to guests. When she reached me, she paused. Her smile looked different, almost mischievous. "Here you go, Grandma," she said. I reached for the glass, but before my fingers could touch it, the glass tilted. A splash of cold purple liquid exploded across my dress. The juice spread quickly through the fabric, soaking into the expensive material and dripping on the floor. For 2 seconds, the entire room went silent. Then, laughter. Loud, uncontrollable laughter. "Oh my God!" someone shouted between giggles. Tanisha doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Skylar, you are terrible!" she shrieked. But her voice carried no anger, only amusement. Marcus covered his mouth, trying to hide his smile. "Oh, wow," he murmured. I looked down at my dress. The purple stain was impossible to ignore. It spread across my chest like a giant bruise. The dress I had spent $150 on, money I couldn't really afford. Skylar still stood in front of me holding the empty glass. Her small face looked innocent, but her eyes sparkled with something else, something learned. "Oops," she said softly. The laughter around the room continued. My hands began to tremble, not from the cold juice soaking into my skin, but from something deeper, humiliation. "Mommy said you don't belong here." Skylar's quiet voice cut through the noise. The room slowly grew silent again. Her words echoed inside my head like church bells, clear, loud, impossible to ignore. I lifted my eyes. Tanisha was still laughing as she cut slices of cake. She didn't deny it. She didn't correct Skylar. Instead, she said, "Kids say the funniest things." A few guests nervously chuckled. I stayed seated in that uncomfortable chair, the sticky juice clinging to my skin. For a moment, the old familiar feeling returned, the one I had felt for years, the feeling of being small, unwanted, invisible. But something inside me had changed. I slowly stood up. The room watched. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, stronger than I expected. "Well," I said quietly, "I suppose it's time." Marcus frowned. "Time for what?" I reached into my purse. Inside was a sealed envelope, one that had been sitting there all evening, waiting. I placed it gently on the table beside the birthday cake. "You see," I said softly, "there's something about this house that most of you don't know." Tanisha's voice faded. "What are you talking about?" I looked around the room. Every pair of eyes was on me now, and for the first time in many years, I finally had their full attention. The long night. The silence after my words felt heavier than the grape juice still clinging to my dress. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire room had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Then Tanisha exploded. "You can't be serious," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "You sold the house?" I calmly picked up a napkin and dabbed at the purple stain on my dress. "I did." Marcus stared at me, disbelief written across his face. "Mom, this is our home." I met his gaze. "Is it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked down at the papers again as if hoping the words would magically change. "They can't just kick us out," he said weakly. I sighed softly. "They can if the house belongs to them." Tanisha slammed her hand on the table. "This is insane. You're doing this because of a stupid accident with some juice?" Across the room, Skylar shifted uncomfortably. Her small eyes moved between her parents and me. I looked at the little girl for a moment, then back at Tanisha. "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because of 20 years." The room went silent again. Marcus frowned. "What does that mean?" I slowly walked toward the window. Outside, the streetlights had begun to glow in the evening darkness. For a moment, I simply watched the quiet neighborhood. Then I spoke. "Do you remember the first Thanksgiving after you married Tanisha?" Marcus blinked. "What does that have to do with this?" "Just answer the question." He hesitated. "Yes, I remember." I nodded. "I brought a pumpkin pie I had spent all morning baking." Tanisha rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, are we really going to talk about pie right now?" But I continued. "You took one bite and said it tasted like cardboard." A few relatives shifted awkwardly. "You threw the rest in the trash while everyone watched." Tanisha shrugged. "Well, it wasn't very good." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Mom, that was years ago." "Yes," I said, "years of small moments like that." I turned slowly to face them. "The Christmas when you forgot to invite me until the morning of the party." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "That was a misunderstanding." "The family photo where Tanisha asked me to stand in the back so I wouldn't ruin the picture." Tanisha crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." And today, I said quietly, glancing down at my dress, the grape juice. No one spoke, because deep down, they knew. Marcus let out a long breath. Mom, if we ever hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. Tanisha looked at him sharply. Marcus! But he continued. We didn't realize you felt this way. I studied his face carefully. For a brief moment, I saw the boy he used to be, but the moments passed quickly. Didn't realize, I repeated softly. Then I looked at Skylar. The little girl was staring at the floor. Sweetheart, I said gently. Skylar looked up at me. Yes, Grandma? Who told you to spill the juice? Tanisha's head snapped toward her daughter. Skylar, don't... But the girl answered before her mother could stop her. Mommy said it would be funny. The room froze. Every head turned slowly toward Tanisha. Her face turned red. That's not what I said. Skylar frowned slightly. You said Grandma needed to learn she wasn't important. A gasp spread across the room. Marcus looked at his wife in shock. Tanisha, did you actually say that? Tanisha threw up her hands. Oh my God, she's a kid. Kids misunderstand things. But the damage had already been done. My sister Gloria shook her head quietly. That's just cruel. Tanisha's eyes burned with anger. You're all acting like she's some helpless victim. She pointed at me. She's been manipulating Marcus for years. Marcus looked confused. What do you mean? She never liked me, Tanisha shouted. That's not true, I said calmly. I simply watched. The room fell quiet again. Watched what? Marcus asked. I looked directly at Tanisha. Your character. Tanisha laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations, you got your revenge. I shook my head slowly. This isn't revenge. Marcus glanced again at the documents in his hands. So tomorrow, someone is really coming here? Yes. To make us leave? Yes. Tanisha scoffed. We're not going anywhere. I raised an eyebrow. You might want to pack tonight. Marcus looked exhausted. Mom, please, let's talk about this calmly. We are talking calmly. You know what I mean. Just tell the buyer you changed your mind. I smiled sadly. I can't. Why not? Because the sale is already finalized. Tanisha suddenly looked nervous. Who'd you sell it to? I walked toward the door and picked up my coat. You'll find out in the morning. Marcus took a step toward me. Mom. I stopped and looked back at them. For what it's worth, I really did hope tonight would be different. No one had an answer for that. I opened the door. The cool night air rushed inside. Behind me, the decorations still hung from the ceiling. The birthday cake remained untouched on the table. My 65th birthday party, the one that had finally shown me the truth. As I stepped outside, Marcus called after me. Where are you going? I paused on the porch. To a hotel. Tanisha laughed sarcastically. So dramatic. But I didn't respond. I simply walked down the driveway toward my car. And as I drove away from the house I had secretly owned for 10 years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. But inside that house, Marcus and Tanisha were about to experience the longest night of their lives, because tomorrow morning, the new owner would arrive, and their shock was only just beginning. The morning visitor. The night inside the house was long and restless. Marcus barely slept. He spent most of the night sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents I had left behind. Every few minutes he would reread the same lines, hoping somehow they would make more sense the next time. They never did. Across the room, Tanisha paced back and forth like a storm trapped inside a small space. This is ridiculous, she muttered for the 100th time. You showered the deed? Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. She showed us the papers. That doesn't mean anything, Tanisha snapped. Maybe the sale isn't final. Marcus sighed. The papers looked real. Tanisha stopped pacing and crossed her arms. Well, whoever shows up tomorrow is going to hear from me. Skylar sat quietly on the couch, hugging her stuffed rabbit. She had been unusually quiet since the party ended. Finally, she spoke. Mommy, are we in trouble? Tanisha forced a smile. Of course not, sweetheart. But Marcus noticed the uncertainty in her voice. Morning came far too quickly. At exactly 9 a.m., a black sedan pulled slowly into the driveway. Marcus saw it first from the window. His stomach tightened. They're here. Tanisha walked over and looked outside, her jaw clenched. Good. Let's get this over with. A knock echoed through the house. 3 firm knocks. Marcus walked to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch were 2 people. The first was a tall man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. The second was me. Marcus blinked in surprise. "Mom." I smiled politely. "Good morning." Tanisha appeared behind him and immediately rolled her eyes. "Oh, great, you brought backup." The man beside me cleared his throat. "Good morning, my name is Mr. Reynolds. I represent the new owner of this property." Tanisha crossed her arms. "Yeah, well, tell your client we're not leaving." Mr. Reynolds opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I'm afraid the sale was completed yesterday afternoon. Legally, the property no longer belongs to you." Marcus looked nervous. "Who exactly owns it?" Mr. Reynolds turned slightly toward me. "The owner is standing right here." Marcus frowned in confusion. "Mom already told us she sold it." I nodded calmly. "Yes." Tanisha let out an impatient sigh. "So who bought it?" I looked directly at her. "I did." The words seemed to freeze the air. Tanisha blinked. "What?" Marcus stared at me. "You bought it?" I nodded. "I sold it to a real estate company yesterday morning and bought it back through another contract in the afternoon." Marcus looked completely lost. "Why would you do that?" "Because," I said softly, "it allowed me to change the ownership terms." Mr. Reynolds handed Marcus another document. Marcus read the first few lines. Then his face went pale. "Mom, this says—" "Yes," I said gently. "The house now belongs entirely to me." Tanisha's mouth dropped open. "That makes no sense." I stepped inside the house slowly. For the first time in many years, I walked through the living room not as a guest, but as the owner. "The difference," I continued calmly, "is that the previous arrangement allowed you to live here indefinitely." Marcus looked up from the paper. "And now? It doesn't." Tanisha's voice rose again. "You can't just throw your own family out." I looked at Marcus. I know what he knows I can. Marcus swallowed hard. "What exactly are you saying, Mom?" I glanced at Mr. Reynolds. He spoke in a professional tone. "According to the new contract, the current residents have 30 days to vacate the property." Tanisha exploded. 30 days? Mr. Reynolds nodded calmly. "That is correct." Skylar looked up from the couch. "Are we moving?" The lesson. Actually, there might be. My words froze everyone in the room. Marcus looked up slowly, hope flickering in his tired eyes. "What do you mean?" Tanisha stepped forward quickly. "Yes, what exactly do you mean?" I placed my purse gently on the table and took a seat. For a moment, I studied their faces. Marcus looked exhausted and ashamed. Tanisha looked nervous, but still defensive. And little Skylar sat quietly beside her father, holding her stuffed rabbit, watching everything with wide, confused eyes. I spoke calmly. "There is one way you can stay in this house." Marcus leaned forward immediately. "Anything, Mom?" Tanisha nodded quickly. "Yes, tell us." I held up one finger. "One condition." The room fell silent again. Marcus swallowed. "What condition?" I looked at Tanisha first, then at Marcus, then finally at Skylar. "My condition is simple," I said quietly. "If you want to stay in this house, things will change." Tanisha frowned. "What kind of change?" "The kind that should have happened years ago." I stood up slowly and walked toward the living room window. For years, I allowed myself to be treated like I didn't matter. My voice was calm but firm, like I was an inconvenience. No one interrupted, because they knew it was true. I turned back toward them. "That ends today." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right. but Tanisha still looked uncomfortable. So what exactly do you want? I walked back to the table and picked up the papers Mr. Reynolds had brought. I will allow you to stay here under a new agreement. Marcus was relieved. What kind of agreement? You will pay rent. Tanisha's eyes widened. Rent? Yes. Marcus asked quietly, how much? I named a number. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't cruel. It was fair. Marcus nodded slowly. That's reasonable. Tanisha looked shocked. You can't be serious. Marcus turned to her. It's better than losing the house completely. But I wasn't finished. There are 2 more conditions. Tanisha groaned. Oh my God. I ignored her. First, you will apologize. Tanisha rolled her eyes. For what? Marcus stared at her. For everything. Tanisha hesitated. The room waited. Finally, she crossed her arms and muttered, Fine. But I shook my head gently. No. She looked confused. That wasn't an apology. Tanisha clenched her jaw. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Then she looked at Marcus, then at Skylar. Finally, she looked at me. Her voice came out quieter than before. I'm sorry. The words sounded strange coming from her. I shouldn't have said those things or encouraged Skylar to embarrass you. The room stayed silent. I studied her face carefully. For once, the arrogance was gone. I accept your apology, I said calmly. Then I looked at Skylar. But there is one more thing. The little girl looked nervous. Yes, Grandma? I knelt down in front of her. You are a smart and kind little girl, I said gently. But yesterday, you hurt someone. Skylar looked down at the floor. I know. Why did you do it? She hesitated. Because Mommy said it would be funny. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Skylar's voice became small. I'm sorry, Grandma. I smiled softly and hugged her. I forgive you. Children learn from the adults around them, and that was the real problem. I stood up again and faced Marcus and Tanisha. My final condition, I said, is respect. Marcus nodded immediately. You'll have it. Tanisha said nothing, but she didn't argue either. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. Should I prepare the rental agreement? Yes, I said. He nodded and began writing notes. The tension in the room slowly faded. Marcus looked at me with gratitude. Thank you, Mom. I smiled gently. Don't thank me yet. He looked confused. This is your second chance. I glanced around the living room again. At the decorations, at the cake, at the stain still visible on my dress. Make it count. Marcus stood and walked toward me. For the first time in years, he hugged me the way he used to when he was a child. I'm sorry, he whispered. I hugged him back. I know. Tanisha stood awkwardly nearby. Finally, she spoke. Would you like some fresh cake? I laughed softly. Only if Skylar promises not to throw anything this time. Skylar giggled. I promise. The room slowly filled with quiet conversation again. But something had changed. The power balance was different now. For the first time in a long time, they understood my value. And sometimes that's what it takes. Not anger, not revenge, just the courage to finally stand up for yourself. Because respect should never be optional.